I remember the day I first heard about Fiona. It was a late afternoon in March, and I was crouched under a makeshift tent on the edge of Kenya's Masai Mara Reserve, sipping bitter black tea from a tin cup. The rains had been delayed that season, and the grasslands were drier than they should have been, dust rising from the cracked earth like smoke. We were in the middle of a campaign to educate local communities about poaching and habitat encroachment. I had just finished leading a workshop when my colleague, Joseph, rushed in, cradling a satellite phone like it held the world's last breath. "There's a calf," he said, breathless. "A baby hippo, alone in the river." My cup paused halfway to my lips. That sentence didn't make sense. Hippopotamuses are herd animals, fiercely protective, especially of their young. A baby wouldn't be left alone unless something had gone terribly wrong. "She's tiny," Joseph added. "Too early. Premature, they say." The mother, gone. No one knew what had happened. Some said the mother had been swept away in a flood surge, sudden, violent, and all too common after the region's unseasonable drought. Others whispered of territorial fights between bulls, or a poacher's bullet misfiring into the wrong target. Whatever the truth, the outcome was clear. A premature hippo calf had been found shivering on a muddy bank along the Nile's remote tributary. "She's too weak," Joseph warned, handing me the phone. "The vets say she won't survive in the wild. She needs round-the-clock care." I spoke to the field team, a cluster of wildlife rescue experts who had wrapped the baby in blankets soaked in warm river water to keep her skin hydrated. They named her Fiona. It was simple, delicate, and oddly human. A name that seemed both wildly out of place and perfect for a creature born into such chaos. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing her, this small, vulnerable creature with skin the color of river clay, eyes wide with confusion, and a heartbeat unsure of its place in the world. We'd seen many animals in distress, rescued our fair share too, but something about Fiona felt different. Maybe it was her size. Maybe it was the odds stacked so high against her survival. Or maybe it was because she was a symbol of what we stand to lose when we forget to care. 2 days later, after endless phone calls and logistical acrobatics, Fiona was flown from Africa to the United States, her tiny body monitored by a team of veterinary staff, conservationists, and animal handlers. It wasn't a decision made lightly. Normally, the goal is to keep wild animals in their native habitat, rehabilitating them with the hope of releasing them back. But Fiona's case was different. She was too small to eat solid food, too underdeveloped to regulate her own body temperature, and had no mother to guide her instincts. She landed in Cincinnati, an American city far from the wild floodplains of her birth, where she was entrusted to the care of the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Garden. The zoo had a long-standing reputation for their dedication to animal welfare, and their hippo exhibit had recently undergone extensive renovation. It would become her home, her nursery, and ultimately, her sanctuary. But her story wasn't just about survival. It was about connection. In the beginning, the odds were cruel. Fiona was born 6 weeks premature, weighing only 29 pounds, about half of what a healthy newborn hippo should weigh. She couldn't stand. She couldn't nurse. Her lungs struggled to expand, her digestive system wasn't ready for solid food, and her skin dried quickly without constant moisture. The zoo's staff, led by a woman named Christina Gorsuch, the curator of mammals, developed a round-the-clock care program. Fiona had her own medical team, vets, nurses, zoologists. She received fluids through IVs, was monitored 24/7, and fed a specialized milk formula designed for premature calves. Zoo staff crawled into her pen at all hours of the night to massage her belly and stimulate digestion. Her body temperature was checked every hour. When she finally stood, wobbly and unsure, it was as if an entire city exhaled in relief. By then, the public had already fallen in love. You see, someone at the zoo had the good sense to document her journey. They posted videos and photos, Fiona wrapped in pink blankets, Fiona receiving a bottle feed, Fiona flopping clumsily into her shallow pool. People shared them with captions like, "Tiny but mighty," and "Little miracle." In a world often consumed by bad news, Fiona became a symbol of hope. She wasn't supposed to live. But she did. And she did it with wide eyes, funny snorts, and a charisma no one could have predicted. Within weeks, her fanbase exploded. The hashtag Team Fiona began trending on social media. Letters poured in from children across the globe. Hospitals reached out, asking if Fiona could visit virtually with young patients. A bakery created Fiona-themed cookies. There were Fiona plush toys, coloring books, and t-shirts. She was a baby hippo with the soul of a rock star. But even as Fiona's fame grew, the truth remained. This wasn't just a story about a cute animal in pajamas. It was about fragility, about how easily we can lose something beautiful, and how hard we must work to save it. As the weeks passed, Fiona grew stronger. She gained weight. Her skin glistened. She learned to walk, then to trot, then to swim in deeper waters. The keepers taught her to open her mouth for dental checks, to respond to her name, and to interact with enrichment tools. She developed a particular fondness for sweet potatoes and watermelon. Yet, Fiona was never just a zoo attraction. Her story carried weight far beyond the glass walls of her habitat. In conservation circles, she sparked renewed interest in river ecosystems and the importance of preserving wetland environments. In classrooms, teachers used her as a case study in biology and animal care. And for me, someone who had seen too many animals vanish into statistics, Fiona reminded me why we fight. She wasn't just one more rescued animal. She was proof of what happens when compassion meets commitment. It's strange, really. You start with a muddy riverbank in Africa, a dying calf, and a team of strangers doing their best not to let go. And somehow, it becomes a global movement. A baby hippo that didn't know how to breathe on her own becomes an ambassador for wildlife. But that was only the beginning. Because Fiona, in all her pinkish gray, squishy, floppy glory, still had more to teach us. The real story wasn't about how she survived. It was about how she would live. It was a spring morning in Cincinnati, the kind where the air still carries a hint of winter's last breath. I had flown in from Nairobi at the zoo's invitation, after months of watching Fiona's journey from afar. First in whispered updates over satellite calls, then in the gleam of screens filled with her waddling across pool decks and nuzzling bottles the size of her head. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for meeting her in person. She was bigger now, almost unrecognizable from the fragile calf once pulled half frozen from a riverbank. Still, by hippo standards, she was small. At 4 months old, she weighed around 200 pounds, light for her age, but her energy was thunderous. She trotted, stumbled, splashed, and snorted with the enthusiasm of a child discovering its place in the world. Her skin was a rich slate gray, dotted with little tufts of baby fuzz, and her ears twitched constantly like they were keeping time with her heartbeat. And oh, her eyes. Fiona looked at you the way only animals who've known struggle do, with the depth of someone who's seen the edge and bounced back. There was intelligence behind those eyes, a knowing calm. Like she understood she wasn't just a baby hippo. She was a symbol. In the months that followed, Fiona became a full-fledged phenomenon. Local news crews shadowed her every move. National outlets ran features with titles like Fiona the Fighter and The Hippo Who Stole America's Heart. She graced magazine covers. Children came to the zoo wearing handmade hippo ears. Tourists booked vacations to Cincinnati just for a chance to catch a glimpse of her. She was too young still to be introduced to her parents, Bibi and Henry. Her health was still being monitored, her growth charted in meticulous detail by the zoo's animal care team. They measured every pound gained, tracked her hydration, counted every step toward independence. Fiona's keepers worked in shifts. They were more than staff, they were surrogate parents. They knew her moods, her quirks. She loved belly rubs. She responded to certain voices with a head tilt and soft grunt. She hated loud noises, and she had a strange fondness for classical music. I shadowed them for a week, documenting Fiona's routine, taking notes, asking questions. And what I saw was this incredible balance of science and love. A team blending medical expertise with emotional investment. Their entire world revolved around a single, improbable creature. "I've never seen anything like her," one zookeeper told me. "She's got this presence. People feel connected to her. Like she's theirs." And maybe that was it. Fiona wasn't just a zoo animal. She was ours. The world's baby hippo. A miracle born in struggle and raised in devotion. But with fame came pressure. By the time Fiona was 6 months old, there were growing concerns about her future. Hippos are territorial, social animals. They need structure, hierarchy, and space. While Fiona was healthy enough now to consider joining her parents in the main exhibit, no one knew how she, or they, would react. Integration between hippos isn't always smooth. Dominance has to be established. Fights can happen. Injuries, too. For Fiona, whose first months of life had been coddled by human hands, entering the wild dynamics of a hippopod could be dangerous. It became the subject of debate among zookeepers, conservationists, behaviorists. Some argued she needed the social interaction, the lessons of hippo life that humans could never truly teach. Others urged caution. She had come too far to risk now. I remember standing by her nursery pool, watching her roll belly up in the water, her stubby legs paddling as she snorted joyfully through her nostrils. I thought of her mother, what she would have done, how she would have guided Fiona through the ways of hippo life. That instinct was missing, and yet, somewhere deep inside her, Fiona seemed to know she was meant for more. Eventually, a decision was made. The introduction would happen gradually. Fiona would first meet her mother Bibi through a barrier, seeing, smelling, hearing her before ever touching. Then, they'd be allowed together under supervision, in short sessions, with veterinary staff on alert. I was there the first day Fiona met Bibi. The gate opened. Fiona waddled in cautiously. She looked up at the towering shape of Bibi, full-grown, powerful, protective. For a moment, neither moved. Then Bibi lowered her head. Fiona blinked and snorted. And then, almost too gently for belief, Bibi nuzzled her. There was no panic, no aggression, just recognition, as if something ancient stirred in them both. It was the most hopeful thing I'd seen in years. Their relationship deepened over time. Fiona was still precocious, more curious than cautious, always testing limits, but Bibi tolerated her with surprising grace. They swam side by side, shared food, even dozed together in the afternoon sun. Henry, Fiona's father, was more aloof at first, as bull hippos tend to be, but in time even he accepted her. It was then that the Cincinnati Zoo began referring to them as a hippo family. Not just a collection of animals, but a family, an idea that resonated powerfully with Fiona's growing fan base. She became more than a zoo animal, more than a social media darling. She became an icon. Her story was featured in children's books, educational programs, and fundraising campaigns for endangered species. Conservation efforts tied to Fiona raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for river protection projects in Africa. Her journey was used to highlight the delicate balance of ecosystems and the threats hippos face from habitat loss and illegal hunting. And to me, watching from both near and far, Fiona represented something even deeper. She was a living argument for why we fight for wildlife. Not because every animal becomes a celebrity, but because every life is sacred. Every effort to save, to protect, to heal, matters. One evening, near the close of summer, I returned to the zoo after hours. It was quiet, just the rustle of leaves and the distant hum of pumps filtering water through the hippo pool. Fiona floated peacefully near the edge, eyes half-lidded, body still. Bibi was nearby, snorting softly in her sleep. I leaned against the railing, watching them. "You did it, little one," I whispered. She didn't move, just exhaled a slow ripple of bubbles. But I'd like to think she heard me. Of course, Fiona's story wasn't over. Her journey had taken her from abandoned calf to beloved ambassador. But there were still challenges ahead. Growing pains, health scares, questions about what it means to be a wild animal raised by humans. But one thing was certain. Fiona had already changed the world around her. She had taught millions of people to care about a creature they might never have thought about before. She had shown what was possible when science and empathy walked hand in hand. And she had reminded those of us who fight for animal rights that every battle, every rescue, every life is worth the fight. I've spent decades in the field, tracking elephants, darting rhinos for relocation, calming orphaned chimps who screamed for mothers they no longer had. I've watched the sun rise over the savannas of Kenya, set behind the rivers of Botswana. And in all that time, through all those lives touched and lost, I never thought the most powerful conservation story I'd ever tell would center on a baby hippo born 6 weeks too early in the wrong part of the world. But then came Fiona. When she turned 1 year old, the Cincinnati Zoo held a public celebration, part birthday party, part victory lap. Fiona weighed nearly 500 pounds by then and had long since passed the critical danger stage. Children arrived in droves, wearing hippo hats, singing songs written just for her. There were cakes, one made of fruits and veggies for Fiona, another frosted for her human fans. The local mayor declared it Fiona Day. But amid all the laughter and photo ops, something deeper was happening. Parents told me their kids had learned about endangered species because of Fiona. Schools wrote to the zoo about incorporating her story into science curriculum. Donations to wildlife conservation funds surged, many tagged with the simple note, "For Fiona." She had become more than a feel-good story. She had become a bridge, between people and animals, between science and emotion, between a fractured world and the unifying power of empathy. Still, Fiona's life was not without its complications. As she matured, she grew more curious, more independent. Her interactions with Bibi evolved into the typical dynamic of adolescent testing and maternal patience. She pushed boundaries, sometimes literally, bumping into exhibit doors, trying to wedge herself into places she didn't belong. She tried asserting dominance with other animals, not yet realizing that hierarchy had to be earned, not taken. There were health scares too. One summer, she experienced a minor colic episode, a digestive blockage that had everyone on edge. The veterinary team acted quickly, and within a day she was back to her playful self, but it was a sobering reminder. Fiona was still vulnerable. Still a living creature with needs and fragilities. As the years went on, she continued to grow, physically, emotionally, symbolically. At age 2, she was already close to 1,000 pounds. She swam with the grace of a dolphin and the confidence of an animal that had overcome every odd stacked against her. She developed an unmistakable personality, bold, mischievous, affectionate. And her fame only expanded. There was a documentary made. A children's animated series pitched. A line of books that followed her from infancy to adolescence. But the media frenzy never changed the core of Fiona's story. Because at its heart, it wasn't a fairy tale. It was a testament to what happens when people care enough to act. When I returned to Africa for the annual Wildlife Symposium in Nairobi, I told Fiona's story on the main stage. Most of the audience, veterans in conservation, already knew it. But I didn't tell it to impress them. I told it to remind them. You don't always get to save them, I said, showing a photo of Fiona's tiny body swaddled in wet blankets. But sometimes, with the right people, the right timing, and a little luck, you do. And saving one life can ripple outward to save thousands more. By the time Fiona turned 5, conservation organizations were using her platform to promote anti-poaching initiatives in Zambia. Wetland restoration projects in Tanzania bore her name. A hippo sanctuary in Malawi received funds directly tied to Fiona merchandise, stuffed animals and storybooks purchased by children half a world away. She'd become a symbol not just of hope, but of connection. Proof that people would care, if you gave them someone to care about. Of course, some critics remained. They said Fiona was too domesticated, too far removed from the wild to ever be a true hippo. They claimed the zoo's spotlight on her distorted the public's understanding of wildlife. That she was more mascot than mission. And I understood the concern. Truly, I did. But I also remembered the baby I met years before, the one whose ribs showed through her skin, who struggled to take her first breath, who would have died quietly and alone if not for the people who refused to let go. Fiona was not born into the wild. That choice was never hers. But what she became, a living, breathing ambassador for a species too often forgotten, that was something the wild could never have given her. In the end, Fiona didn't need to return to the African riverbanks to make an impact there. She did it from the heart of the American Midwest. From behind the glass of an exhibit that, through her, ceased to be just a zoo attraction and became a window into the importance of preserving life on this planet. I've seen children press their hands to that glass, their faces lit with wonder. I've watched elderly visitors cry quietly at the sight of her floating peacefully in her pool. I've read letters from cancer patients who found strength in her survival. If Fiona can do it, one read, so can I. And in that way, Fiona became something even greater than we could have imagined. She became ours, not owned, not possessed, but shared, a collective reminder that compassion is still alive. that effort matters, that life, in all its messy, miraculous forms, is worth defending. Years from now, when she's grown into her full size, nearly 3,000 pounds of power and poise, Fiona will still live at the Cincinnati Zoo, in the habitat she helped bring to life. She'll swim, sunbathe, and snort alongside the next generation of hippos, maybe even raising calves of her own. And her story, born of desperation, shaped by care, sustained by love, will continue. Because Fiona is no longer just a baby hippo who survived. She's a legacy, and we are lucky, so lucky, to be part of her story.